Hello, everybody. We were paused there at 5 seconds, but I think everything's working now. Welcome to the launch of Amazing Atlantic Canadian Women. To begin with, we want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship. We recognize that we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to each other and to this land. We also recognize the 400-plus year history of communities of African descent and the 50 African communities of African descent in Nova Scotia throughout the region. We are grateful to work in Mi'kma'ki. We are continually learning more about how we can deeply engage and move forward with the work of truth, reconciliation, and equity. We recognize that without action, an acknowledgement is empty. It marks the beginning of the work ahead of us, not the end. So, I want to thank everyone who had a hand in bringing this incredible book together, including, of course, the authors, Stephanie Domet and Penelope Jackson, and its amazing illustrator, James Bentley. Also, a thank you to the Canada Council for the Arts and the province of Nova Scotia, whose support makes our publishing program possible. And now a bit about this afternoon's event. It's going to begin with a discussion among the authors and our moderator, Sue Goyette, and end with questions from you in the audience. So if you have questions, you can type them into the comments box at any time, and we'll bring them up when the question period starts. And now I want to introduce Sue Goyette. Sue is an award-winning poet who has published 7 books. I think I'm right about that. 7 books of poems and a novel. She is presently Poet Laureate of Halifax, and she teaches creative writing at Dalhousie University. Welcome, Sue.
Hello, thank you. And I'm going to introduce Steph Domette and Penelope Jackson, our wonderful authors of this fabulous book, amazing in their own right. And we will get to our conversation and celebration of welcoming this book into the world. Stephanie Domette is the author of 2 novels, Homing, which won the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award, and Fallsy Downsies, which won the Jim Connors Dartmouth Book Award. She also writes nonfiction for publications across Canada. Penelope Jackson is the co-author with Melinda McCracken of Paper Girl, a middle grade novel about the Winnipeg General Strike of 1919. An editor and ghostwriter of children's and adult books for almost 20 years, Penelope is also a songwriter and a garden and lives with her family in Halifax. And before we go into the book, I wonder if there's anything you want to add. Those biographies are very short, and I know that you live big, rich, and exciting lives, and I wonder if you want us to know anything else about yourselves before we start talking about this book.
It's like such a terrifying question somehow. No, I don't know why.
Brag away. What else are you good at? What do you like? What do you love? Who's the writers who are inspiring you? Tell us about yourselves, because you're amazing in your own right. And I think this is really good modeling for the young people in our audience, especially the people who identify as women or girls, to learn to take some space to talk about themselves in bright celebratory ways.
All right, well, I'll step into that. Thank you, Sue, for that invitation. I love to cook, and I love to sew, and I love to read. And lately, part of my personal pandemic response has just been reading like I used to read when I was a kid, which is to say obsessively and broadly. And that has been kind of amazing to me to reconnect with the world that I always find on the pages of books. I forgot for a little while. I got kind of caught up in my digital life, and I forgot about how much I love the analog world of books and the printed page. So I've been really just sinking into the arms of printed stories again in a way that I haven't done since I was much, much younger.
Oh, that sounds delectable. Thank you. Penelope, what about you? What would you like us to know about you?
No, nothing. I'm good. I'm just kidding. I also love to read, and I've also been responding to the pandemic by reading a lot after the first 6 months or so when I couldn't read anything but CNN.
Mhm.
And I have 2 kids that I'm busy raising. That's probably the bulk of my time, and play a lot of music, play some banjo, and work a lot.
Yeah.
Pottery, like to do pottery.
You like
That's
to-
it though.
Well, I want to first congratulate you on this beautiful book. It is not just like filled with like women I want to have meals with all the time and hang out with, but it's also a really beautiful book. It's like, speaking of the delectable reading that you did when you were a child, Steph, this
Mm.
book is just such a delight to turn the pages of. I mean, you get portraits of the women. There's little boxes of text to read. It's just a delightful read. And I want to shout out to James Bentley, an artist who lives in Ile Perrot in Quebec, for the wonderful illustrations that animate or bring to life these fabulous women, which is a nice addition to the collection of fabulous, wonderful women. I just have all these adjectives.
Superlatives.
And that the book is out in the world. How does that feel after all your work? This is the celebration of that. So I also want to give space to, like, this is no small thing to publish a book, and it's no small thing to contribute to our understanding of not just history, but what's going on in the world from points of view that we sometimes don't hear about. And so you're kind of writing the kind of imbalance in some ways and contributing to evening an equitable understanding of how things are working. So how does that feel?
We were so conscious of doing that, I think. Would you agree, Penelope, that that was like top of mind for us?
That was the primary objective, was to tell the stories that we don't all already know. And we all know which stories those are. I mean, to start with, they're women's stories, right? You could pick even just a bunch of white women from last year, and there'd probably be stories that are submerged. But then, you dig deeper and you dig into the Indigenous and Black histories here. You dig into newcomer women, and you find, and women with disabilities. And you find a whole bunch of untold stories. And we were so conscious, especially when we were having so much trouble finding any information beyond little mentions here and there of women. And we would be digging and going through archives and reading old newspapers and everything, just trying to find something about these women. And it never made us think, oh, let's maybe not include her. It was like, oh no, we'll put a line about how hard it was to find information about her. But we wanted to hang on to those women and drag them into the light because, I don't know how long a book lasts, but it lasts longer than, microfiche, or certainly at least read a few more times than that. So we were super conscious, and it feels absolutely wonderful. I think it's the best part of publishing this, and there's a lot of incredible parts, which I'm sure we'll get to, but the best part is knowing all of the stories that are here.
Yeah, the less we could find out about a woman, the more eager we were to include her in this book. And Penelope, I'm just thinking about what you say about like how long a book lasts, and even outside the paper and the binding, so many of the stories I read when I was a kiddo are still taking up part of my mind and my imagination. So it feels amazing to have made a book that I hope kids will love to read as much as I loved to read stuff like this when I was their age.
Yeah.
Especially given the role books play in our lives, how they kind of provide a company for people who sometimes can't find the company they need. This particular book, I think, will really help rally young people's spirits, and give them the kind of company and mentoring, even, or inspiration.
Yeah.
So many of the stories. But first, before we really dig in, I just want to tell everybody who's joining us I want to thank you for joining us. We're here and we're celebrating the launch of this fabulous book. We're going to talk a little bit about how it came to be and some of the adventures you both had in the writing of it. And then I'm going to ask these two writers to read a couple of stories that they're choosing from this book, and we can listen to that, and then we'll come back to talk a little bit more before opening it up to questions from all of you. So if we say anything that intrigues you and you want to know more, that just pop it into the comment box. And like Kate said, she'll remind us of what those questions are before the hour is up. So this program is for an hour, and we're going to get to the reading probably in 20 minutes and talk some more, and then we're going to hear questions. So don't be shy, and we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, so this must have been a grand adventure because, first of all, like you said, there's not a lot of material. Like the whole purpose of the writing is to uncover people we barely hear from. So how do you find these people? How do you make the list of people? How do you choose the people, the women? And what do you do with the women you can like, just what was it like
Yeah.
to work through that?
We were asked to provide 50 profiles, and we wrote 74.
Yeah, and we were like, Whitney, we're
starters.
Here you go. So, I guess I want to, it's not like every single person is completely obscure, but I think that they're just not all celebrated. So there's definitely people who are very successful business people, but that we just don't know. So I don't want to sound like we're like complete heroes, but we're pretty heroic.
Okay.
I am.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And it's funny, like there's even one woman who's an incredible Paralympian from Newfoundland that I had never heard of. And then when we talked to CBC in Newfoundland, they were like, of course, there's people you'll know, like Katarina Roxon. And I'm like, you guys know about this? Why didn't you tell us? But yeah, so it was, there were varying degrees of difficulty.
Yes.
In discovering them, first of all. And you go, Steph.
Well, I was going to say, there were a bunch of things we were trying to balance. So it's a book of Atlantic Canadian women. So we wanted to make sure that we were, casting a wide net across all 4 provinces. We wanted to write about historical women, but also we wanted to write about contemporary women. We wanted to get the dynamics right of, really reflecting the communities that we have and the communities that we may have. We wanted any kid who picks up this book to find some reflection of themselves in it, to be able to see themselves in it. And so that is a lot of work, as you can imagine. And then trying to find, so there were, as Penelope says, there were like people we knew or knew of. And then we needed to find a lot of people we didn't know of. And it's really hard to find something that you don't know what it is yet.
How on earth do you know? And, we sort of imagined ourselves in a Model T with our aviator glasses on, driving around the countryside, searching through archives to find all these incredible women. But of course, we wrote it throughout a pandemic.
Right.
So we had to really rely on like some excellent Google skills. So we would be in a chat together and we would say, all right, I'm going to do a search for most incredible Black New Brunswick women. And Steph was like, great, I'm searching for successful Newfoundland business. So we would just be doing these really specific searches. So that's why we would be like, we would find a glancing mention of a name, maybe on a couple of lists, and not be able to find any more information and have to go read, like, we relied so much on things like academic papers that, someone had done the research on this one obscure lawyer or whatever. And we relied so much on that to find out more about these mystery women, basically.
I love Penelope, what's her name? Agnes, the woman who the reading room is named after at Dell.
Oh, yeah.
Agnes Simi Baxter. Yeah. That's how we found out about her. I was like, we don't have enough people in science and tech. I'll search for like women math, Nova Scotia. And it's just like this one, like, oh, the Agnes Simi Baxter reading room. And I was like, well, but who was she? And it took so long to figure out like a full picture of who she was. And in fact, she's, the 4th woman in North America to graduate with a doctorate in math.
She's remarkable. Yeah. Well, each person in this book is remarkable in their own way. And I'm interested in, so how did you divvy up the work? Like, this is a huge job, just so, like you said, Steph, like people who aren't easy to find. Yeah. So that, but then it's like, so you had 74. How do you like decide which women you're going to write about? Like, did you have to like argue why you should be the person? Like, did you just do it very mathematically?
I'm a procrastinator, and Penelope starts everything right away.
So I just
earning the A+ in the group work, and I'm hanging on for dear life. So Penelope started, and I wrote the others.
I did what I wanted, Sue, and then Steph filled in.
I mean, that's a great
It felt
friend.
fine to me. That was like a great way to divide it. And then near the end, there was a little bit of like, hey, I've kind of hit a wall with this. Can I trade you this one?
That's
And
right,
I'll
we
do
did
that
some
one.
trading.
And, you
And
know.
that was, I mean, we have a very collaborative friendship. We
Mm.
have also worked together in a few capacities, and we're very used to a volley back and forth of ideas and directions. And it feels so good to work with Steph because she's so good at getting things done and digging. Like anything that required a phone call, that was Steph's job. Because
And this is where we sometimes traded, because I'm very comfortable interviewing people. It's not, you know, Penelope, obviously you can do it, but
I'm
you
happy to email them.
Yeah.
That's great.
So if there was that kind of thing, that's where we often traded, where I would say, listen, well, if you write this one, I'll take that one totally off your plate and make the phone call.
That says something really interesting about collaboration for any young writers out there, or people, or young people who want to do something big. It's like we're all kind of either Bert or Ernie. Is my like kind of idea.
Jesus.
And I think, you know, some people are just really more outgoing and are extroverts, and some people aren't. And like combining those two things and the skills that you both bring to this must have been like, it's so radiant, an expansion of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Set of skills.
I want to reframe that as Piggy and Gerald, and I will accept the role of Gerald, but I refuse to be Bert.
Whatever.
Because I'm clearly Ernie.
Whatever Muppet you want to wear on your hand. Whatever. But yeah, that's great. That collaboration I'm hearing is really a strong aspect of how this works. But considering you were working in the pandemic and we were going in and out of isolation, the communication between the both of you had to be pretty strong. What other things did you notice about writing collaboratively about a subject that is so vast? Like, how are you sitting with the women who weren't included? Like, do you want to have like a redux, like a refresh? Do you want to like a part two? Like,
can you make that happen?
Look, I'm trying, but tell me how to
manifest it.
How's that working?
Yeah, that part's hard.
That part's really hard. You know, you know, we had to be really careful to go between provinces and between disciplines. But Steph and I sure know a lot about arts in Nova Scotia.
We could have just done amazing Atlantic Canadian women artists.
We can't put Sue in our book.
Well, we got a full discussion. Volume 2, Sue. Volume 2.
That's right.
Well, I mean, like a volume 2 seems like the best thing that could happen.
I think there's a few other parts, so that, you know, I want to talk about that this is a part of a series. This is a series called The Amazing Atlantic Canadians. We've got Amazing Atlantic Canadian Kids, Amazing Black Atlantic Canadians, and I don't think I'm allowed to say what the next one is, but I'm so excited for it. So there's a lot to be covered. And if Nimbus comes back around in 5 years and says, hey guys, we're ready for number 3, part 2, we're ready with a list.
Yeah. Great. And that's really great. And Nimbus, if you're listening, of course you're listening. Hey, Nimbus.
Well, I hope so, Sue.
What?
I hope they are.
We hope they're listening.
You know, of course they're listening, and it would be a great idea, and they're doing fabulous work. This is a great series for how it introduces. So what I noticed, like when you were talking, Penelope, about talking to the radio host in Newfoundland, in St. John's, how they immediately knew this person, and what I noticed about, so I've noticed 2 things about this book, is how grounded these women are in community. The other thing I noticed was the subtitle, The Fascinating Stories of Excellence and Determination. So let's start with community and how important you think that plays a role in the kind of excellence and determination these women are living, like the fortification they have, and how they're actually making change in where they and how they live. Community. Let's talk about it. How important is it?
It is a great question. I'm immediately like testing that to see if there's exceptions, because I hadn't observed that myself, Sue.
Yeah.
So,
well, even if it's not the community they're living in, but the community they're living along with, given who and how they are.
That's right. And
For
Yeah.
example, someone who's living with a disability and is living in an active way is creating community for other like-minded, for people who are finding themselves in the same situation, and is serving as a kind of inspiration. So they're also making community, aren't they?
And I think that's where I just got to in my brain a little more slowly, is that, yeah, there's uh, maybe said a slightly different way. It was very interesting dividing this book into chapters based on calling or field, because there's an activism, like a politics and activism, and almost every person in this book we could have put in the activism section. Like, there's so much crossover there, and that speaks to community, right? Like, these were all people, just by virtue of being who they were and doing what they do, had to pull people around them and find people who could support them, because they had to try to change the world around them to make it possible for other people. And you can see that there's so many door openers in the book. There's so many women who were like smashing something down so that a crowd could follow.
Because and what I noticed is so much of what they've accomplished was turning back to the community and starting something for the community. There was even one story, and like, there's so many names that I can't, but it was some person who had this really high-ranking job and quit it so they could go back and work with people in their community. I think in Labrador.
Zita Cobb, maybe? So she's on Fogo Island in Newfoundland, and so she made her millions in oil and went to retire on her island, and then was like, no one can live here. Everything has collapsed.
Yeah.
And her family had to move away because the fishery collapsed. And she's done incredible things creating, and she speaks really openly. She's like, these people don't need money. Like, I could just give people money, but they need like a reason to live. They need a reason to stay on the island. So they're all working. They're doing boat building. There's an incredible arts residency. But yes, exactly. And there's been a really a deliberate return to community. I think about Ruth Goldblum, whose parents were immigrants. She grew up in Cape Breton, and then cared so much about what a good life her parents were able to create by moving to Canada, that she put all this effort into helping the museum, the Pier 21 Museum, the Museum of Immigration.
Which was amazing.
So, and that was the same thing. She was like, this place has done so much for my family, and I want to mark this place that welcomed so many people to this community. So yeah, you're right.
That's what struck me, is that how relational these women are, how they move, they connect to other people rather than getting all the trophies. They do other things with like, they might get trophies and they deserve and earned them, but then they do something else. Like they become mentors for people who are learning what they've done, or they, it's just that's something I noticed. Steph, do you have anything to add to the idea of community in this?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about Betty Riley, who was a television producer from Newfoundland, a Black woman, and how, she looked around and saw that the stories of Black Canadians weren't being told. And when the media were telling those stories, they were usually getting them wrong. And so she, like so many of the women in this book, blazed a trail. And then, as you say, turned around and gave a hand and started a program to train Black teens to also, to work cameras and to speak in front of them and to write, and just like sharing those skills and saying, hey, I did this and you could do this too. And here's why you might want to. And I love that spirit. That is in so many of the women that we
And you're making me think of Christine Poker too, Steph.
Oh my gosh, Christine Poker, who is an Innu filmmaker.
That's who I was thinking of when I thought of this book.
Oh, yeah. So she became a filmmaker kind of by accident, and then loved that way of telling stories, and then sort of looked around her community and thought, well, any of these people could also work on film. There's nothing, I could help make that happen, and trained her friends and neighbors to be crew and cast. She told CBC, I think this was in a little CBC mini documentary, that it was much more interesting to work with her neighbors than it would be to work with actors. That they had everything that they needed to do this, and it was much more interesting for her as an artist. And I love that spirit. And just I don't know her. I feel like I know all these women. They're all so amazing, but I just love the sort of like roll up your sleeves, can do. What have we got around here that we could make something amazing out of? Oh, incredible resources. Great. Let's put them all together and see what happens. That spirit I just love. And it is in so many of these stories.
Almost all of them, because it's that, going back to the subtitle of excellence, and the determination seems to be what struck me about the women. There's a huge historical span. Like, this book goes, what's the first, the
first birth date is circa 1762, and
Yep.
the final birth date, the last birth date, is 2004.
I mean, that's a remarkable span of amazing women, and they all seem to have this kind of species of determination. And it was really evident in me when I was reading about the women who were living at a time where getting an education was almost impossible, and yet they persevered. And not only persevered, would sometimes have to take a break in that education to go out and earn money to go back to finish their degree, and then go on. And it's just that determination. And I wonder if you can speak about your thinking about that determination, like how it manifested in different ways. And was there anybody who stands out for you who was particularly tenacious in a good way?
Penelope knows who I'm going to say, because I can't stop saying this woman's name. I just am so floored by her. And it is Maria Louisa Anguin, who was our first female doctor.
Yeah.
She was raised in a family with a bunch of brothers, 4, I think.
Yeah.
And she was raised to serve, to be of service. Her family believed in service.
Mm-hmm.
But her parents weren't going to pay for her to go to university. They were paid for the brothers, but not for her.
Yeah.
So she went to the normal school, became a teacher. She taught. She didn't want to be a teacher, but she did it because that was a way a woman could earn money. She earned the money for her education. There were no medical schools in Canada that were admitting women. So she went to a medical school in upstate New York that was run by a pair of sisters who were educating women to be doctors. She became a doctor and she came back to Nova Scotia. And there are details about her that to me really speak of her determination, especially her determination to be herself.
Yes.
And to be really true to who she was, because there's slightly eccentric details. She went wherever she was needed in any neighborhood or community around Halifax. And one of her contemporaries asked, aren't you scared to go into that neighborhood or that neighborhood? And she said, oh, I always have a hat pin I can use to defend myself if I need to. And she had at her office, her doctor's office, she had a parrot. And when someone rang the bell, the parrot would say, someone wants the doctor. And to me, her keeping a parrot is just so, I don't know what it is about that detail that I love so much, but it speaks to me of her singularity, like her devotion to what she wanted and how she was. And again, that I think is a spirit that is in so many of the women that we profiled, and for people who are, willing and able to really strongly and truly be themselves, I think they're unstoppable. I think that makes you unstoppable.
There's something about that, like moving back to really accept and celebrate who you are, and then moving with that fortitude into the world, that makes for, like, that really talks to that determination. I think that's true. And that parrot was a fabulous.
It's such a good
work, like, into her 70s. Like, didn't she just keep working?
She kept on going.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Penelope, is there anyone that stands out for you in terms of determination? And
I feel like that's maybe that's the center of the Venn diagram that is the women in these book. Like I truly, I think, some of the later women in the book are maybe determined, or their determination is able to manifest in different ways. And some of these women, like you said, they had to be so determined just to get through their education. And when Steph talks about Maria Louisa Anguin, who do I talk about, Steph? You know who I'm
You
going
talk about Clotilda Yakimchak.
You know what? I wasn't gonna.
Oh, were you going to talk about Annie Isabella Hamilton?
Annie Isabella Hamilton. So she.
Oh, are you going to write a song for every woman?
Well, yes, I'm going to.
A companion album.
Oh my.
Bastardize a song for every woman. So she. I'm going to talk about Annie Isabella Hamilton because she worked with Maria Louisa Anguin, and we have these they're paired in the book. They're beside each other because they were working in the same field at just about the same time. And the reason I like to talk about Annie Isabella Hamilton, is because she was the first woman to graduate from Dalhousie's medical school in 1894, I think. And this was like 50 years before Harvard was even letting women in, right?
Yes.
And the reason I like to talk about her is because we have this little piece of historical detail that you can't get this kind of color. And I got this right at the end I had already written her profile, and then found there was like some date I was double checking, and I found this old Dalhousie Gazette from 1959. And I'm going to read a little excerpt from there. So the Dalhousie Gazette ran a piece that quoted her classmates, describing her as not very attractive and having aroused both horror and amusement as she rode around the North End on a bicycle in divided skirts.
The nerve.
And furthermore, the boys in her class sent a petition around the class to get her a bustle, meaning they were making fun of how she dressed and wanted her to be more decorative. So, and this isn't gone.
No, I was going to say, let's make a space right now to acknowledge to all the young people out in the world and that are listening to this, how it continues. And if you are a person who is being picked on and who's being considered, people are calling you names, just to know that you're in really good company and that you're not the problem, right? That's
exactly right. So here's what Annie did. She kept going. She did not listen. She did not change how she dressed. She kept wearing her divided skirts. She worked with Maria. They worked on teaching people about hygiene, and they were also super into temperance.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They did not appreciate the booze.
Or the smoking.
They did not want any of that tomfoolery. And she maintained her focus. She stayed what the Dalhousie Gazette, I think this is where it came from, referred to as outspoken, which is a word we use when women won't shut up about whatever they think is important. And she eventually decided to do missionary medical work. So she moved to China. She had learned Chinese when she was at Dal, and she wanted to work with poor women and abused women in China. And she stayed there, and she lived in poverty, and she would write articles for this like publication in Montreal from there. But so I think about her because we have like these beautiful, colorful details about Maria and her friend and colleague, Annie. We have those really grim details. And I think it's really important for us to be celebrating all of these firsts and also acknowledging that determination sometimes is, in my mind, not misspent. It was spent where it had to be, but what a waste.
What a waste.
Well, it can be very lonely, I bet.
Super lonely, and to think of what women then and women now, and especially women who are Black or Indigenous or trans or any number of things that aren't quite accepted the way they should be. Women spend a lot of time just trying to get out the door.
So my last question before I'm going to invite you both to read a couple of stories each and talk about why you've chosen these fabulous women and how you'd probably want to just read every one of them. I want to hear every one of them out loud.
Oh, that was what we had prepared.
Excellent. The Woodstock of launches. It's going to go for 3 days. How did you reckon with, you're right. A lot of women, marginalized women who are like not centered in a white body and, cis women, are experiencing a lot of violence and things we don't even see. And going through this material, how did you sustain your good spirit so that you weren't constantly enraged and yelling, which is, something that a challenge when you see the injustice and that it's ongoing and chronic and the level of violence systemically so many people continue to endure, thinking missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. I'm thinking of the racism that's still rampant and so obvious. I'm thinking of poverty. I'm thinking of all the ways in which the good spirit of the people you're writing about have been eroded or challenged. What was the self-care you did for yourselves that besides having the company of each other I'm sure you had some dark times, and do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I was going to say, was not being enraged an option? Mostly we did have each other, and we sent each other a lot of notes about like, this woman was so amazing, and here's how everyone around her was trying to drag her down.
Yeah.
And I just need to vent about that.
Yeah.
We did a lot of that.
So there was a lot of venting. I also want to say there was no direction from our editor, Emily McKinnon at Nimbus, or the managing editor, Whitney Moran, to pull any punches.
Yeah.
So a lot of where we directed all of that was to be honest with the kids who are reading this book, because the thing is that the kids reading this book have experienced sexism, and they've experienced racism, and they've experienced ableism. You know, they know what's up. They know what transphobia is. They know. And so we wrote really frankly. And when we needed to put the words environmental racism into a piece, our editor encouraged us to write a sidebar on what environmental racism is. And so we didn't despair, but we didn't try to avoid our anger or do anything with it other than be honest and communicate it and tell the truth for all of these women. And we didn't say, we didn't just, give a gold star to all the firsts. We talked about how hard it is to be a first doing anything. And I think that's where we put it. It was just productive. It was very productive. There wasn't a time when I felt like I was stuck in a bad feeling. I felt like we were working with bad feelings a lot.
Yeah.
Which is really good modeling for people, and especially young people, who aren't accustomed to making that bad feeling operational rather than just getting stuck in it. So doing something with that feeling and seeing how each woman had to work through something difficult and challenging to get to the excellence part is really, really inspiring. And I think this book is going to be really good company for the readers who pick it up and anyone who brings it into their classrooms. And we can talk about that later. But right now, I think we should get to our reading before we run out of time for the questions from your grand audience. So who would like to start to read first?
Steph.
Okay.
I'll go first. I'm going to turn on these fancy lights back there.
Oh my goodness, it's daytime again.
They won't help me read, but they will help me not recede into the darkness. Well, thank you so much, Sue, for your great questions and for doing this with us. We're so glad to have you here to help us celebrate this launch, and thanks for the invitation to read from this book as well. So I want to read this profile of Laura Shepard. And the title we gave this one is Changing Perceptions. Laura Shepard is a writer, journalist, and community worker who uses her own story to help educate people and advocate for trans rights. Laura began to transition when she was in her 50s, living in rural Nova Scotia. She was married at the time with 2 mostly grown kids who called her dad. She and her then wife were growing apart, and Laura knew it was time to step into the truth of who she was. She began writing about her experiences as she transitioned, publishing pieces with alternative news sources like The Coast, Nova Scotia Advocate, and the Halifax Media Co-op. In The Coast in 2018, she wrote about what's changed since she began transitioning in 2012. I can't tell you the number of times city bus riders surreptitiously photographed me, elbowing their seatmates to great giggles and guffaws. Once 2 women practically jumped up and down in the aisles, excitedly posting my photo to Instagram. That was 6 years ago. They'd be kicked off the bus today. That's real change. Early in her transition, Laura began hosting a holiday open house for trans and queer people who couldn't go home for the holidays because their families don't accept them. She told CBC about it in 2015, saying, "Maybe the holidays aren't about the decorations and the colored lights. The holidays are about the people. You make the space available, you give people the opportunity, and you support them when they come." In return, she told CBC, she's received support from the community. "I have the privilege of knowing a lot of people who are trans or gender nonconforming who are younger than me," she said. "And so my transition is made easier by their mentorship. And there aren't a lot of people my age who get mentored by people half my age. As far as experiences go, that's cool." In 2020, Laura moved from Halifax to Toronto, where she works with trans and non-binary folks who visit the health center where she's employed. For Laura, it's another way to make community. It's a huge privilege to be doing the work I'm doing at this stage in my life and my career. It's astounding to watch people grow into themselves. When Laura arrived at the health center, she noticed that people in different departments didn't communicate with each other, and she thought their work would be improved if they talked more. Laura says one of her colleagues joked, "We knew we hired you because you're a trans woman. We didn't know we hired you because you're a Nova Scotian." Which I thought was a wonderful compliment about community and the possibility of that to save us all, Laura says. What Laura has learned and what she most wants people to understand is that you have sovereignty over yourself and your gender and who you are. Where you come from has value, but it doesn't have to shape you in a way that limits your possibilities. And there's a lot more opportunity now to talk about things like how we live in our bodies and occupy our gender. And the more young people feel confident and safe talking about those things, the more well-rounded adults they're going to be, whoever and however they turn out to be.
Yay, thank you so much. I just feel like, yay!
That's what I wanted to do too.
Yeah, so it's so heartening to hear that story. Thank you. Penelope,
Thanks for making the space for it. Laura's amazing.
Laura is amazing. And transitioning at 50, go Laura.
Yeah.
She's awesome.
Mm.
Yes, I'm going to read about Lena O'ree. She's a civil rights hero from St. John, New Brunswick. So Lena O'ree fought for big changes everywhere she went. In 1931, at age 17, she was the very first Black radio host at St. John's local radio station, CFBO. The radio station did not want to advertise that Lena was a Black woman, but Lena went ahead with hosting the show anyway. She loved music so much that she was determined to share it with listeners. She even accompanied a church choir on piano live on the air. A few years later, she tried to join the YWCA. The organization wouldn't accept her, telling her that if she wanted to join, she had to find 5 other Black women who would join too. The very next day, Lena brought 10 Black women to enroll with her. They formed the Recreation Club of the YWCA, becoming the first Black members of the YWCA in Canada. In the 1950s, Lena was working at the biggest hotel in St. John, the Admiral Beatty, as a housekeeper. Segregation was still being enforced at the Admiral Beatty, and Lena, because she was Black, had to use the back door to the hotel. At that time, even major celebrities like Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong had to use the back entrance. Paul Robeson, a famous singer and actor, had even been refused accommodation at the hotel entirely back in 1945. Lena decided enough was enough and insisted on using the front door. This led to the policy being changed at the Admiral Beatty. And here's one of those little spots where, God, I wish we had more information, because how exactly did it lead to that change? We don't know, but we know that it did. And eventually at Canadian Pacific hotels countrywide. So the whole country changed that policy. Shortly after that, the Liberal Party, grateful for the support of Black voters, asked Lena how she thought they could thank the Black community. She asked for the dining room at the hotel to be desegregated. Lena was a founding member of the nonprofit group called Pride of Race Through Unity, Dignity, and Education. The group provides anti-racism education and works for inclusion and participation of all races and cultural groups, describing its vision of a New Brunswick where various ethnic and cultural groups work together to build on each other. For all this and all her other work and activism, Lena earned a New Brunswick Human Rights Award in 1998. Go, Lena.
Go, Lena. Woo!
Amazing,
Everyone. So this book is packed filled with those kinds of stories. So I can see how your rage would dissipate eventually into this celebration of each of these stories. I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, I'd love to hear you read again, but I'm also thinking we should maybe make time for questions from your
questions.
Let's see if there's any good ones. And if there aren't, we'll just read some more.
Excellent plan. Kate,
really good plan.
any good questions?
Oh, I didn't see it. Kate, can you bring it back? Thanks, Amy.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Amy.
Oh, nice. Everyone should. Okay. What would each of you write about the other for book two?
Oh, well.
Make me cry, Jean.
I would need a whole book to write about how amazing Penelope is.
I would have trouble answering that without crying, but I'm going to go really fast and try.
Okay.
Starting. Steph is one of the most engaged and curious and brilliant people that I've ever known, which she's still trying to learn about herself, I think. And I guess it would be inappropriate to write a whole profile about how great it is to be her friend, but that's probably what I would end up doing. How lucky I am to be her friend, and it would probably get edited.
Well, I would edit it, so I would probably.
You would edit it, and what would you add about yourself? I just have so much trouble talking about it without sobbing. But Steph is one of the so accomplished. She walks into organizations, excels at everything she does, and then when it's not serving her, she walks out, which is a skill that a lot of people need to learn. Time to quit. Time to quit. She knows when it's time to quit, and work her magic somewhere else. And the needs improvement box is just really just want her to finish her next novel because what I've read is incredible.
Excellent.
Well, that's lovely, Penelope. I would be hard pressed to fit it all into a profile the size of the profiles that we write, which were 500 words. God, Penelope is probably the smartest person I know and the most sensitive. And I think it's really hard to be both of those things, like sharp and soft at the same time. Penelope always knows what's up long before anyone else does. She gets it right every time. But she also has such a big and beautiful heart and is so funny and makes the most inappropriate jokes that make me laugh so hard. And I'm usually just like trying to keep up, just holding on for dear life. She's such a talented musician and a great mom and an amazing friend and a beautiful potter and such a good editor. And I learned how to write a book for kids by writing a book for kids with Penelope. That was not something I knew how to do before. And working with Penelope, like just kind of, she just led by example and let me figure out how to do it by watching how she was doing it. And I think that's such an incredible and graceful skill, and just the knowledge to naturally make that space for people. That's something I see Penelope doing all the time in every arena, and I am in awe always.
I feel like mine was so bad now. That was so beautiful.
So you're both shining such great supportive lights on each other, and that's what, like, it feels like a lot of the women in this book did for each other, right? And for so I just love that the love is growing. If you could sit down for a meal with all of the women featured in this book together and only ask one question, what is the one question you would ask?
Maddie, wow.
That's a really hard question.
Wow, Maddie, I love this question because it's so hard.
Only one question.
This is going to be some, that's really hard. Steph, you used to be a professional question asker.
I did used to do it professionally. I still do sometimes.
I know.
Here's what I would ask, because we weren't able to ask most of these women this question. What do you most want people to know about your life?
Yeah.
And you know what? I second that because I don't have a better answer. And I loved seeing an interview with Elizabeth Panashaway when she's in our book, and we haven't spoken about her tonight, but she's an incredible activist. Just such a force. And she said, more people need to know about me. More people need to know what I'm doing. And I just saw that a couple days ago because I was checking on the pronunciation of something, and I was like, yes, we put her in the book. So that's a great question to ask people, Steph. I think I would probably ask something along the lines of like, how did it all feel to do what you were doing?
Yeah.
To do what you do. Some of it is in the present. How does it all feel?
How does it all feel? Yeah, those are great questions. Estelle would like to know what your message is for young women today. That was one of my questions too. What would you say to young women who are thinking about making changes?
Hi, Estelle. She's my 3-year-old next door neighbor.
Hi, Estelle.
Great question.
Estelle has asked a wonderful question. My message is do it together. Find your people. You can't do it alone. And there are people who will love love you and challenge you and hold you and push you, and that you'll do the same for in return. And that's the only way you'll survive. And also, just be patient, like not be patient, but like we get this, like especially precocious women. And I think a lot of the women in this book, precocious girls, feel like they're running out of time all the time to do something impressive. And I want to say to, 15-year-olds who feel like they're not like too old to be a child prodigy, or 20-year-olds who are like, I'm not special anymore. That's not true. Like your contributions will continue to grow.
And I would say, like, take your place, like take space and take your place, and know that, you know what's going on. And a lot of people will try to tell you that you don't know what you know, but you do know. And that's a-okay. And you're going to be okay if you can find that voice inside yourself and make sure you listen to it and honor it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a really good thing. And just like kind of figuring out, oh, good.
Thanks, Kath.
Hi, Kath.
I feel like we're now seeing every comment.
Just getting all our friends all up in here.
Yeah, I like that stuff. And Sue, that thing about, so just that whole idea, and you both have talked about it, but yeah, like when and we, a lot of young women just like, it's like I call it the awkward haircut syndrome, when someone gives you a terrible haircut and you tip them more so that the awkwardness goes away. Like we don't have to go along with the fictions presented to us.
Also, I think there's something really important when people are telling us we're being loud.
Yes, get louder.
And I just want to add that, like, if you're finding yourself saying something loudly, and if you find yourself saying something over and over again, and people are like, you've already said that. Repetition is insistence. And if you keep saying it, it means something wants to change. And you look around to see who meets your eyes when you know that something needs to change, because they're usually your people. The people who are telling you to be quiet, look away. So, yeah. So you gave advice. This is great advice. I'm wondering how you'd like to see this book. Like, let's dream big. How can this book move in the world? If there's teachers out there listening, if there's people who have kids in school, how can this book move in ways that people might not consider? Just, it's great. Go out and buy this book, and it's available everywhere, and there'll be a screen to show us at the end of this where it is available. And you go a long way in buying books written by people, especially people in your community, and that's always a good thing. And in this season, a book is a fine gift, so that's one way. But are there other ways you'd like to see this book move in the world for the good work it can do by instigating the kind of conversations we're having today with younger people who are like finding themselves on the planet at a really challenging time?
Mm-hmm.
I think the best places kids' books can end up is classrooms and school libraries. So I've donated some to my daughter's school, and I've seen this book a little bit. It's only been a couple of weeks, but also the other books in this series. And Veda is my daughter. Hi, Veda. She's upstairs watching. She better be. She'll say, "Oh yeah, kids go up to the front all the time to take that out. They're always taking those books." So it's like I think it's really important to have it. Kids have reading time in class. They go over to the shelf, and if they can pick up a book that's going to speak to them and show them that there's lots of different ways of being and succeeding and finding community, then I think that's really vital.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of this book being in schools, or just like, gosh, in the hands of any little kid. That idea to me is just so
very moving.
Thrilling.
Thanks, Janelle.
Janelle?
I agree. Well, I know Nimbus has an education specialist that is working on getting these books sold to the school board, so that would be really great. But also across the country, right? Like, these women aren't just impressive.
That's right. That they're from here is doesn't mean they stay here.
That's right.
The good news of them should be spreading. So that's another thing. If you're buying the book, make sure you buy an extra couple to send to people out west, or people who because that's how we spreading the word of this goodness and people and examples of women who are moving through the challenges with a determination that brings them to their own singularity and excellence is a form of liberation and sovereignty we want everybody to know. And so spreading that word is great. What factors in your life facilitated your own amazingness?
Oh, hi, Kate.
You want to go first, Penelope?
I have the excellent parents, lovely big sisters, and good friends, and lots of trees, and a lovely husband and great kids. Like, it's just people. It's just people and trees.
Yeah, I second all of that. Amazing parents, amazing siblings, amazing friends, amazing spouse, amazing nieces and nephew who teach me so much, and trees. Yeah, mostly trees.
I loved what Laura said about having a young mentor.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I
That
want a young
was
mentor.
so exciting to me when she said that
Yeah.
she recognizes that she is being mentored by people half her age, and how cool that is. I
That
think
takes
it's
a
very
lot
cool.
of open-heartedness. It takes
Yeah,
a-
and generous. Yeah. Here's a great question. Thank you, Shirley, for this question. What is next for you both in the coming months?
Hi, Shirley. Thanks for being here. What is next for me? I'd like being really close to my wood stove and trying to finish my third novel.
Yeah.
Writing it, not reading one. I've read lots of them,
Excellent.
but I'm trying to finish writing another one. Yeah.
I am mostly an editor, so lots of editing. I also ghostwrite, so a lot of that. And then I do also have a couple of things that I'm working on for myself. And the reason all of my answers are work is because it's winter.
Mm.
And then probably around January 30th, I will start looking at seed catalogs.
Do you want to talk a little about what you're working on for yourself?
No, it's really early. I have a picture book manuscript and some other stuff that I'm working on.
Do you?
Yeah.
I will be peppering you with questions about those by text later.
You know, a gal could get used to having her name on the cover instead of tucked away on the copyright page.
I hope a gal gets used to it. It is my fondest wish for you.
Hi, absolutely. Welcome to the front
Come
of
on out.
the book.
That's right.
Any advice for any young writers who are out there who are thinking they would also like to highlight people in their community or write stories about how they can do stuff like that?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
I mean,
Steph works with young writers all the
I
time.
do work with young writers, and they don't struggle the way the adult writers I work with do. They just do it. They love their imaginations. They feel completely entitled to sit down and write and to share their work. And I hope that never, ever changes for them. So young writers, if you're out there, if you're listening, your voices are wanted. Your stories are so valuable. And yes to you. Always yes. And I love the idea of highlighting people in your community. One thing Penelope and I both really loved about this project was how easy it was to find amazing stories, really. You know, Penelope, you said this often, like if you talk to anybody for 10 or 15 minutes or read about their life for a little bit of time, you'll quickly find what makes them amazing. You know, everyone has some thing that they're doing or way that they're being that is extraordinary, really. And so talking to people in your community and hearing their stories, I think is a great way to tap into also what makes you amazing, you know?
And what makes you excited?
Yeah.
It's good to listen to what makes you excited. I can see that we're sort of getting close to the end.
Yeah, I'm on top of it. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, not to that particularly. I just want to make sure that our launch doesn't go by without talking about all the people at Nimbus.
Okay.
Because I really like, you know, I'm a background person. I live in the shadows. And they shouldn't. So Whitney asked Steph to write this book with me. Whitney Moran, doing such incredible work with the Nimbus list. She's just outstanding. Emily McKinnon was our editor, and she found lots of things that we needed to fill in. She helped so much, especially with getting the sidebars and the glossary and making sure that we didn't gloss over things. She was really making sure that we got everything covered. Heather Bryan and Jen Embry And I believe Peggy Eisenman also worked on the layout. So they were doing the design, and the cover is so beautiful. And, you know, James Bentley's illustrations are so gorgeous. And also Nimbus does beautiful things to make the whole book feel as important as the illustrated pages. And they also allowed us to put 20 pages of references in a children's book, which as an editor, I really would have fought to not include, I got to say. So I really appreciate that they let the writer, me, do that, knowing that as an editor, I would not have allowed that to happen. So I super appreciate that. You know, Terry Lee is always working to push Nimbus out into the industry, and finally, and not least of all, Kate, thank you so much for helping us get this launched, and, you know, calling all the radio stations and just supporting us through that part of this, which is, I've always washed my hands of a book before before the launch date, so I never have to do this stuff. So I really appreciate you, Kate, all your help. And Steph, can you think of anybody that I've missed?
No, I second all of that. We're so thrilled to have the beautiful work and support of everyone at Nimbus in making this book. It like, we wrote it in a pandemic. We wrote this thing.
And they've got it printed and shipped and distributed in a pandemic. They're promoting it in a pandemic.
You can't get paper, but they got paper, and they made our
paper for us, for all these women.
It's really thrilling.
Yeah, and I feel so grateful to every single one of these women for living such exciting lives that we, and, you know, like we had to edit down the list. We also had to edit down every profile, right? Like we had to cut everyone down and down and down. So
I was thinking, Sue, about like that question of like, how did you keep going? You know, what was the self-care like? And for me, in some ways it was easy, because even though I was often angry at what the women, you know, the causes and conditions, what these women faced, they were very easy to love as well. And I found myself just loving each of them as I wrote about them, read about them, and then wrote about them. And still, like, I feel so very fond of all of these women. Yeah, it's kind of amazing to get to know them on the page in this way and fall for them, you know? And Penelope, I think you had a similar experience.
I think the whole book was written with so much love for you. You know, we love the people working at Nimbus, and then love for all of the women in this book, and like such profound gratitude and love for the people who research we got to use also.
Yes.
Yeah, and to women who answered us, like there's women who answered our emails and our phone calls, and like, wow, yeah, it was written with a lot of love, and I feel so grateful for such a good experience.
Amazing. And so this book, filled with love and excellence and determination
and
anger and really good company. I kind of think the determination is the plow that moves, and the anger and everything is kind of what it's plowing through. This book is moving out into the world now, into everyone else's hands. Congratulations on the publication. I am so happy for you both. This is righteous work. Thank you to Nimbus, and for everyone who turned up and asked questions. You'll see below where you can buy the book. Independent bookstores in Halifax, that would be King's Co-op and Bookmark on Spring Garden Road, and of course there's other places. Nimbus has it online, and it would make a great gift for anybody you know. It's informative and amazing, and you can feel the love that was put into it. Thank you.
And also, you got all final, and I wasn't quite there because I just wanted to say thank you to you, because you got a lot of enthusiasm into this, and thought and care, more than not that we didn't expect it, but like we didn't want to put you out by asking you, but you've done such a lovely job of helping us celebrate the book and remind.
My pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for everyone out there. I have no idea who's out there. I imagine throngs of people.
Oh my God, thousands. Yeah,
thousands. Congratulations to you again, both of you, and I look forward to the next installation of more amazement in whatever form it comes. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks for coming, everybody.